Hello, I'm David Katz. I'm an internist and a specialist in preventive medicine public health, and I was delighted to receive this invitation from ViewMedi to make the case for plant-based eating. And I'll try to do that briskly and still fairly comprehensively. So my career trajectory was forever altered 30 years ago, 1993, with this seminal paper, Actual Causes of Death in the United States. In this paper, Bill Foege and Mike McGinnis looked past the proximal causes of death that get listed on death certificates to ask what caused that. So death from cardiogenic shock, secondary to heart failure, secondary to MI, secondary to atherosclerosis. Really, the key question is what caused the atherosclerosis? What's the modifiable thing at the start of all this? So McGinnis and Foege answered that question for all of the premature deaths that occur in the US every year, but for a rounding error. And their list of 10 explained them all, and all those factors were modifiable even those 30 years ago. What captured my imagination as a newly minted preventive medicine specialist interested in focusing on nutrition and lifestyle was that 80% of premature death and chronic disease was attributable to just three factors, and they were tobacco, poor diet, lack of physical activity, or as I've referred to them ever since, bad use of feet, forks, and fingers. Feet, forks, and fingers are the master levers of medical destiny. 80% variance in chronic disease, premature death. This was reanalyzed 10 years later by leadership at the CDC, reaching the same conclusion. At that time, the gap between tobacco as number one and bad use of feet and forks as number two had narrowed because of less smoking. That's a good thing. And deteriorating diets and physical activity levels, that's a bad thing. But that's where we were back in 2000. If we jump forward to now, or nearly now, we get this conclusion: our food is killing too many of us. Diet quality measured objectively is the single leading predictor variable for premature death from all causes in the United States today, and the single leading predictor variable for the total chronic disease burden. Full stop. Diet quality measured objectively. We'll circle back to this, but that's the state of affairs right now. And if we look at our recent history, rather than that 30-year span, we think about the COVID pandemic, we have indications that there was significant variation in the severity of SARS-CoV-2 infection with objectively measured diet quality. And for quite some time during the pandemic, I felt that I was shouting into the void about this, but ultimately it did get a little bit of attention, such as this article in Politico saying diet quality is critically important to COVID outcomes, and the US is not doing much of anything about them. And that's certainly true. Let's flip the coin over, though, and look at the other face. So I've given you some of the bad news. Diet quality is currently killing too many of us. But what happens when you get these factors right? So Healthy Living is the Best Revenge is among my favorite papers. This study looked at 23,000 adults in and around Potsdam, Germany, and compared the spectrum for four factors. Are you physically active on a regular basis? Yes or no? Do you eat well? Yes or no? Defined quite simplistically as habitual intake of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. Do you smoke? Yes or no? And do you have a healthy weight, which of course is not a behavior, it's an outcome secondary to two other things already on the list: physical activity and diet for the most part. When the researchers compared the two ends of the spectrum, so they compared I don't smoke, I eat well, I'm active, my weight's fine, to I smoke, don't eat well, I'm not active, my weight's not so good, these people over a multi-year span had an 80% lesser incidence of all major chronic disease than these people. So 80% less coronary events and diabetes and development of hypertension and everything else. If you flip the switch from bad to good on any one of these factors, the incidence of any major chronic disease went down 50%, but fire on all four cylinders, 80% variance in the risk of all major chronic disease. And if we look at what food and diet and lifestyle can do, it would be hard to overstate their power. The reverberation of it goes to our very pith and marrow within the double helix of DNA. So this is a study by my friend Dean Ornish and colleagues that enrolled 30 men with early stage prostate cancer amenable to watchful waiting. But rather than just watch and wait and see if the cancer progressed, Ornish and colleagues said, let's give these men the benefit of lifestyle and food as medicine while we're watching and waiting and see what we can do with that. And so they did. So this was a comprehensive lifestyle intervention, plant-based nutrition, physical activity, avoidance, obviously, of toxic substances like tobacco, excess alcohol, and in addition, plenty of good sleep, stress mitigation, strong social interactions, feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love, the six-cylinder engine of lifestyle as medicine. And by the way, I'm a past president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And over months, the investigators looked not so much at the men and not so much at the cancer in the men, but preferentially at the genes in the men with the cancer to see what they had wrought. And they found that the lifestyle intervention took 500 cancer promoter genes and effectively turned them off, and 50 cancer suppressor genes, shown here, and turned them on. Left is before, right is after, red is off, green is on. So this is activation of gene expression with a lifestyle intervention. And later studies showed a significant extension of the PSA doubling time. So a clear impact on the life cycle of cancer. And of course, this is not just one study. I highlight this one study, but this is a whole branch of the literature that's been burgeoning ever since. We also know that there is epigenetic power in diet and lifestyle. So this paper from some years back in the New England Journal preferentially enrolled people at high genetic risk for coronary events and then gave them a comparable lifestyle intervention to see if having been dealt a bad genetic hand could be outplayed with lifestyle. And indeed it could. The risk of coronary events was cut in half, even in people at high genetic risk, with an effective lifestyle intervention featuring a plant predominant diet. So we can't change the genes we have, but we can change what the genes we have do in a number of ways by altering gene expression. And I would go so far as to say that the dichotomy we've all been taught, nature versus nurture, is a false divide, because in fact, we can nurture nature. We can change gene expression with the behaviors we adopt. And we can also change genetic architecture, chromosomal architecture. So those green tips on the chromosomes here are telomeres. And as I trust most of you know, the length of telomeres is a potent biological predictor, other things being equal, of healthy lifespan. You can have long telomeres, still a really bad idea to stand in front of moving vehicles, for example, but other things being equal, long telomeres, long healthy life. And in research associated with a Nobel Prize in Medicine to Elizabeth Blackburn at UCSF, it's been shown that these same lifestyle interventions featuring plant predominant nutrition and all the other good stuff can actually lengthen telomeres. So this doesn't really change any of what we knew was the good stuff. Eating a diet of wholesome foods and sensible assemblies, physical activity, avoiding toxins, getting enough sleep, managing and avoiding stress, strong social interactions. We knew what the good stuff was, but what we have over recent years is an aggregation of the intracellular pathways that explain some of these downstream effects on the health outcomes that matter most, years in life, life in years. We've also seen a lot of attention over recent years to the importance of the microbiome, which I tend to think of really the way I would any other vital organ. I've received the question many times, do I need to eat now to feed my microbiome? To which my response is, do you need to eat to feed your left kidney or your spleen? We've never thought of vital organs that way. A healthy you means healthy parts of you. I would think of the microbiome much the same. And this paper helps to make that case. So associations of healthy food choices for humans with gut microbiota. So in other words, if it's good for you, can we infer that it will be good for your microbiome? And the answer was yes. So large population-based survey confirms and extends findings, other small studies, that a fiber-rich diet is good for you, it's good for your microbiome, short-chain fatty acids production goes up. So that's really the punchline here. What's good for us is good for our microbiome, and vice versa. We need not think differently about feeding the microbiome. The microbiome is critically important, and so is the left kidney, so is the liver, so is the spleen, so are all the other vital organs. Feed yourself well, they all tend to thrive. And then if we're looking at the expansive case for plant predominant eating, we could think of some of the iconic studies that have shown that shifting diets in that direction produce astonishing outcomes. The diabetes prevention program takes us all the way back to 2002, and it showed that a lifestyle intervention featuring a plant predominant diet was twice as good at preventing the incidence of type 2 diabetes in high risk individuals as the best drug we had at the time. That was metformin. Now, of course, we have the GLP-1s now, and I'm not going to get into that topic here, but their effectiveness in preventing type 2 diabetes would be much greater than metformin. But even so, lifestyle was twice as good as metformin, which reduced the incidence of type 2 diabetes by 30%. Lifestyle did it by 58% in this trial of about 3,500 people on the brink of diabetes. We have the DASH trials, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, showing that diet is as effective as pharmacotherapy at treating hypertension when we get it right. We have the portfolio diet, courtesy of David Jenkins and colleagues at the University of Toronto, showing that the right plant predominant diet can lower LDL cholesterol as effectively as a statin drug. We have heart disease reversal studies, both by Dean Ornish and the Lyon Diet Heart Study, showing that a Mediterranean diet can prevent the development of myocardial infarction and coronary events in people with established heart disease, and on it goes. We really have a wide array of studies, all aggregating around the same basic dietary theme and demonstrating the effects comparable to the best pharmacotherapy we have. And then looking beyond what we can show in randomized controlled trials, short-term observational trials, we have ethnography, where we have the fate of entire populations living in the real world. And we can start with the Tsimane, these amazing Amazonians in the Bolivian Amazon. So the Tsimane are modern day foragers or hunter-gatherers. They have a plant predominant diet. They derive close to 80% of their calories from complex carbohydrate and supplemented with a little bit of fishing and hunting. And they have the cleanest coronaries known to science. When age matched with other populations around the world, they effectively have no coronary lesions at all. And of course, this is not just a benefit to one organ system. Scientists are also looking at their astonishing brain health. So they have preserved cognition. They're not subject to dementia. So very strong argument at the population level that a native lifestyle and plant predominant eating are associated with the kinds of health outcomes we want for our patients, to say nothing of ourselves and our families. We also know that this knowledge can be converted into intervention. The famous North Karelia study took a population, North Karelia, Finland, with the highest rates of premature death from heart disease in the world, and shifted their diets from animal food centric to a bit more plant food centric, shifted their dietary fat intake portfolio from saturated fat predominant to unsaturated fat predominant. And over a span of a couple of decades, saw a nearly 85% reduction in the incidence of heart disease. Now, they did other things as well. They worked on getting the population to quit smoking. They worked on sodium reduction. But still, the dietary intervention was front and center, as chronicled here in the Atlantic, the Finnish town that went on a diet, and astonishing results. And then, probably most famously, we have the blue zones, where diet, lifestyle mediated by culture rather than the efforts of individuals are associated with the highest concentrations of centenarians on the planet. To date, we have 5 characterized blue zones in Okinawa, Japan, Ikaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. And if we look across this global expanse of very diverse populations and ask, well, what are these people eating? We could put their diets on a spectrum from animal food predominant and ultra-processed food predominant in red on the left, to plant food predominant and real food predominant in green on the right. And although the diets are quite diverse, and they're not all vegan, certainly, they cluster here at the right end of the spectrum. These are all plant predominant diets. And if we look beyond human health to planetary health, which, by the way, I would digress long enough to say to you, my colleagues, we must. I don't think you can be a health professional anymore if you don't address the health of the planet, because we have some hope of being healthy, vital people on a healthy, vital planet, or we have no hope of being healthy, vital people. So all of us who claim to be health professionals must adopt planetary health as our own. And so looking at the issue of planetary health, our diets are cooking the planet. And we can't achieve any of the health goals we have for our patients if we don't address this issue as well. So critically important to shift to plant predominant eating so we stop burning down the Amazon rainforest to graze more cattle to satisfy the global demand for beef. And if we drill down here and look at the confluence of diet for human health and diet for planetary health, as this group at Oxford did, we're very fortunate to find that there is a tremendous alignment among the factors that matter for both. So if we look at the top chart, A, what we're looking at here is human health outcomes across the top: total mortality, coronary disease, colorectal cancer, diabetes, stroke, and along the side, different foods that exert an influence on those outcomes. And if we look at the cluster of charts in B, it's a different set of outcomes pertaining to planetary health: acidification, eutrophication, which is nitrogen use, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, water utilization, and then along the side, the same foods and their contribution to these outcomes. And this is a pretty dense eye chart. I don't tend to like those. So let's jump to the summary shown here, with risk of mortality among humans on the x-axis and environmental impacts on the y. So the bottom left is the best place to be, the top right is bad. And look at how the usual suspects disperse here. Everything in green is good, everything in red is bad, everything else is in between. So vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, and nuts, all really good for both human and planetary health. Red and processed meat are bad actors for both. This is something we knew already, but we're now looking at it through two lenses: impact on human health, impact on planetary health, which is a key consideration for human health, and frankly, a third lens, because if we get this right, we're also being kinder and gentler to our fellow creatures. So the sweet spot here, where we shift diets to plant predominant, have some opportunity to save places like the Amazon, treat domestic animals far more kindly and avoid factory farming, preserve trees in Borneo for orangutans to climb, and preserve our aquifers while promoting human health directly. So all good outcomes, leading to the conclusion that the fundamental theme of healthy eating is food, not too much, mostly plants, as put so succinctly by nutrition and science writer Michael Pollan. Now, I've looked very directly at this topic over the course of my career. 10 years ago, I was asked by the editors of Annual Reviews in Public Health to write this paper. They gave me the title, "Can We Say What Diet is Best for Health?" and asked me, would I be capable of answering this question without bias? Review the literature, answer the question. And I said yes. And I invited Stephanie Meller, who was a medical student at Yale at the time, to join me. And we did what we were asked to do: reviewed the literature, answered the question. And my conclusion was, no, we can't say some specific prescriptive named diet is best. But we absolutely can say that the basic theme of eating mostly vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds, and drinking water when thirsty is best. And all the variations on that theme are probably in play, but eating mostly plants is clearly the way to go, no matter what health outcome we look at. Now, 10 years ago is a long time, although I wouldn't really change anything I had to say in this paper, but I've revisited all this literature more recently. I'm the lead author now of 4 editions of a leading nutrition textbook, Nutrition and Clinical Practice, and we reviewed 20,000 citations to put together all the chapters in the 4th edition, which came out just a few years back. Same fundamental conclusion. So all of the evidence from all kinds of different studies, everything from randomized intervention trials to ethnography, point toward this conclusion: eat real food, not too much, mostly plants, as Michael Pollan puts it. And among the good news about there being a clear theme of optimal eating, but not one prescriptive diet, is we can satisfy a range of tastes. I work now in the food as medicine space. I invented a new way to assess dietary intake that only takes about a minute. I'm on a mission to make diet quality a vital sign. We have the capability of doing that. If you want to learn more about that, it's at dietid.com. This is patented methodology. We have a number of peer-reviewed papers on the topic. But we stratify a range of diets into 10 tiers of objectively measured quality using the Healthy Eating Index 2020. So we are able to see quite vividly that you can have a Mexican American diet and it's optimized, or a South Asian diet, or Caribbean diet, or Southern American style diet, or Chinese American, or Cuban American, all these different diets and many more. You can optimize them and they're all very comparable to one another nutritionally. Same HEI score, same tight thresholds for saturated fat and sodium and added sugar and fiber and everything else that matters, but the taste and the appearance vary widely. So fixed quality, variable type, allowing people to love food that loves them back. And frankly, this is the formula if we want our patients to adopt and maintain healthy eating. Unfortunately, despite this bounty of knowledge and so much more I don't have time to discuss here today, knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is necessary for power, it's prerequisite to power, but it's clearly not sufficient. And so all that we have learned over recent decades about the incredible power of food as medicine has been lost not so much in translation, but in want of translation, the failure to take what we know and turn it into what we routinely do. It's not lack of knowledge that holds us back. It's lack of that translation into real world action. And so where it lands us is our food is killing too many of us. This op-ed that I showed you earlier in the slide deck was in the New York Times in August of 2019, authored by then Dean of Nutrition at Tufts, Daria Mozaffarian, and former Secretary of Agriculture of the United States, Dan Glickman, citing this study, Global Burden of Disease, to indicate that over 500,000 people die prematurely every year in the United States from poor diet quality. We're not talking about hunger. We're not talking about food insecurity. We're talking about too much junk where food ought to be and a deficiency of whole vegetables, fruits, grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds, and too much of all the other stuff. So that's the evidence-based case for eating mostly plants. And I really do welcome the opportunity provided by ViewMedi to have this conversation with you, because chances are many of you have had very little nutrition education. No fault of yours, it's just the way medical education is structured, something I've been working to change my whole career. The single leading predictor variable for premature death from all causes in the United States today is poor diet quality. And the mission we all signed up for is to add years to lives and add life to years. How can we afford to neglect the single leading predictor variable of the outcomes that matter most? We clearly can't. And so we need all sorts of reforms, both in our training and in reimbursement models and in advancing the food as medicine proposition so that we can better address this critical topic for the health of people and the planet. And with that, I thank you very much for your time and attention.